All right, good morning YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to be going over arguments. So this is going to continue the philosophy series on my channel. Part of the reason why I wanted to cover this is just so that way, not only do you now have the tools to identify, evaluate, analyze, and critique any arguments you hear put out by whoever it is you decide to listen to on YouTube Fitness, but also so that way when I do bring up future topics and future ideas brought on by more philosophical concepts that might seem a bit more in line with what the common conception of philosophy is, meaning what is the meaning of life, well, how should you live your life, what is morality, what is virtue, what is a good life, and all those kinds of things. I wanted to make sure that I first gave you the tools, the language, and the way to kind of think about thinking, right? So let's get into the video today. So if you remember from the last top philosophy for lifters, I kind of had a slide talking about what is wisdom. So ideally, when it comes to anyone trying to tout themselves as some kind of philosopher, it's usually because they want to show themselves to be wise in some capacity. And wisdom is getting clear on what you believe, getting clear on why you believe it, and whether or not the reasons in why you believe it justify your belief in what it is you actually believe. This is the minimal condition for wisdom. Meeting this criteria does not guarantee you are wise. Just because you are clear on what you believe and you are clear on why you believe it and whether or not those reasons in two justify your belief in one, that does not mean you are wise. You can still be a flat earther with those three things. So with that being said, this, while it does not guarantee you are wise, it guarantees you are not wise if you don't meet this criteria. And how do we meet this criteria? How do we get clear on what we believe and why we believe it? We argue. Justification for a belief can be expressed as an argument. So when we talk about arguments, right, what we're not talking about is just a disagreement or debate. So argument, like many words in the English language, I'm not too sure about other languages, but some words have multiple meanings, especially in English. So we're not talking about a disagreement or debate. We're not talking about all the drama channels and all that kind of stuff and what it is they kind of lay out as an argument. An argument is a set of claims or a collection of statements, some of which are premises, and one is a conclusion that the premises support. So we only care about the second definition or the second set of definitions because I just reworded them like if you're reading them, right? So either it is a set of claims wherein some are intended to justify another, or another way of putting that is a collection of statements, some of which are premises intended to support or justify a conclusion. We don't care about the first, we only care about the second. Now, with that being said, when these debates and disagreements do happen, we can, as a result of this video, hopefully, if I do a good job, we can now analyze these disagreements and debates and see who has a better argument, regardless of who it is you like, who it is you have a bias toward. If that person has a better argument, you can now just objectively see that. So let's look at some examples, okay? So to utilize our ability to reason, we make inferences, and meaning we draw conclusions from premises. So for example, if we see smoke, we infer fire. If we see abnormally large shoulders and traps and bad skin and all these other things, then we infer roid use. Those are some examples of that, right? Other examples of like arguments we put forward are strength is needed for size. Therefore, if you want to get big, you must get strong. Testosterone is a very effective supplement at building muscle and burning fat. Therefore, buy my friggin' cookbook. That's another argument you hear on the internets. The barbell lifts are overrated for hypertrophy. Therefore, you should use other exercises. These are all arguments, or at least the last three are. The first two are more so examples of what it is to infer something. So like I said, an argument is a collection of statements, one of which is the conclusion, and the others are premises intended to support that conclusion. For it to be a statement, it has to be a declarative sentence. It can't be a question, it can't be an expletive, it can't be an exclamation, or anything of that nature. It has to be a declarative sentence. So, because a declarative sentence is a sentence capable of being true or false. So I can explain that maybe in the comments or in another video if you need it, but hopefully you're following along. I know you guys are smart. So next, So when it comes to conclusions, the easiest way to kind of think about this is that your conclusions are essentially your belief. It's your thesis. It's your the thing you're arguing for. Whereas the premises are all the things you're going to bring up to justify your belief in that thing. So that's the easiest way to kind of like look at this. Now, when it comes to logic, there's actually two kinds. There is deductive logic and inductive or non-deductive logic. So when it comes to deductive arguments, these are arguments where they are trying to find validity. They are trying to prove with absolute certainty. So for deductive arguments, they're trying to say that something is always necessarily true given the argument that's being presented. So deductive arguments aim for validity. Therefore, form is more important than content. This is where most people actually mess up when it comes to deductive logic, because I'm going to say some things that will just really fuck up your brain, but or at least like some people's like the way of thinking, and it won't make sense when you hear it. But when I talk about logic is very much like its own language, very much like its own math class. So when it comes to these things, be mindful of that, right? So here, listen to this. All cats are dogs. All dogs are reptiles. Therefore, all cats are reptiles. This is a horrible argument because it's not true. It's the premises are not factually true. But a deductive argument does not care about that. A deductive argument only cares about whether or not if the premises were true. So if it were the case that all cats are dogs, and if it were the case that all dogs are reptiles, then by that logic, out of sheer necessity, it must also be true that all cats are therefore reptiles. That is what deductive arguments are trying to do with their formulation. So they preserve truth via form. So think about algebra, right? If A equals B and B equals C, then it stands to reason that A equals C. That's basically what kind of gets carried on here. Are the premises true, and does the conclusion follow from the premise? It's impossible for the conclusion to be false if those first two premises are true. And then, so that's kind of what deductive arguments do. So that's where most people kind of get tripped up. That's where most people get confused. And it is a fairly easy thing to kind of get tripped up and confused. But like I said, the more you brush up against logic, whether you take formal classes, read a couple books, there are full-length philosophy books and courses available for free on the internet, and they will kind of help with that, right? But I don't want to put all that on just this video. So the next thing is inductive arguments. So these are arguments in which if the premises are true, they provide strong reason to believe the conclusion, but not with absolute certainty. So that's the main difference. Inductive reasoning is just looking for strong reasons to believe what you believe, but they don't prove anything. They don't prove something to be 100% true all the time. They just prove that they are worth believing with some level of strength and conviction. So most arguments you hear in life and in YouTube fitness are of this type. It's very hard to actually be purely deductive in all of your reasoning, because a lot of things are just not always known to us, and a lot of things are just always more variable than they are not. When it comes to deductive reasoning, like, you tend to have to use such simplified variables that make it almost impractical for daily living, right? But what we can do is use the tools in deductive arguments to find whether or not our deductive arguments are at least strong. Because if we use those tools to find a valid argument for inductive reasoning, we find that we get a strong argument. So let's kind of go over a bit more about form versus content, right? So going back into that example before, all cats are dogs, all dogs are reptiles, therefore all cats are reptiles. That is necessarily true, because it is impossible for those first two premises to be true and the conclusion false. If it were the case that those first two are true, the conclusion must follow. But let's look at an example that makes a bit more sense. So all cats are vertebrates. That's true. All mammals are vertebrates. That's also true. Therefore, all cats are mammals. That is also true. So here we have three true statements, but it is an invalid argument. Why? Because that conclusion does not necessarily follow from the premises. While the premises are true, the correlation, the relationship between those premises and that conclusion are not strong enough. They are not, all cats are not mammals because of the premises, right? That's what you have to really be clear on here. The first argument is valid because if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Something being true or false is a feature of the premises, not necessarily the conclusion. So you can have true premises and have a true conclusion as well, but because the relationship within them don't actually go together because of the form of the argument, it's an invalid argument. So the second argument is factually true, meaning all three statements are true, but it is invalid because the conclusion does not necessarily follow from the premises. A cat is not a mammal because it is a vertebrate. That's kind of what you're saying there in that second argument. A cat is a mammal because it is a vertebrate. But here's the problem. Fishes exist. Birds exist. There are vertebrates that exist that are not mammals. So that's why it's important to kind of understand the difference between form and content. Because while someone might be right in, let's say, the facts they're presenting, the argument that they're providing you could be invalid simply because they're making a claim that doesn't necessarily follow from what they're presenting you. You see this a lot with a lot of science-based channels, in my opinion, where they present you nothing but cold, hard facts, and then they get some type of reasoning out of it that is just not really strong or supported at all. The connection between the premises, the facts that they presented, and their actual conclusion is just not strong at all. And as a result, people get duped, people get tricked, people get deceived, they get schmackeldorfed, they get all those kinds of things going on, right? So we don't want that happening, and that's why it's important to kind of think about this. Even if they're presenting you something that is factually true, does that mean it's a valid argument? Because I think that's what's more important when it comes to a lot of the things that when it comes to making decisions, whether it relates to our life, our training, and whatnot, right? So to kind of sum that part up, there are 4 different kinds of things you should be on the look for. 1, a factually correct argument. So a factually correct argument is factually correct if and only if all the premises are true. So if you present to me nothing but facts, then yeah, sure, you're presenting a factually correct argument, but that doesn't mean it's valid. That doesn't mean it's strong. That doesn't mean it's sound. So if an argument is valid, that means it is valid if and only if the conclusion follows from its premises. The conclusion is a necessity. It is a absolute necessity as a result of the premises being true. Validity is a function of form. The form of the argument is what matters more than the actual content of the argument for it to be valid. Part of the reason this is the case, we'll get into in a bit later, because if you have an argument that is invalid, right, but it is factually true, even if it is factually true, because it is an invalid argument form, any other argument using that form is also invalid, meaning that there's a lot of leaps in logic and things that just might not be the case that we are now pushing onto people to make them think that they are smarter or making a better, more supported decision, which isn't always the case. So if an argument is valid, any argument with the same form is also valid. And if an argument is invalid, any argument with the same form is also invalid. So for an argument to be sound, this is what we're aiming for with any argument we present. We want our arguments to be sound because we want our arguments to be both factually correct and valid. We want to make sure that the conclusion we are coming to as a result of our premises does actually follow. So here's one thing that I want to make clear though. Because an inductive argument does not prove anything with certainty, it can either only be strong or weak. A strong argument means that you have good, viable reasons to believe what you believe because there is a strong connection between the premises and the conclusions, versus a weak argument in which there is almost no reason to believe the two. So I guess an example would be like, it is sunny today, and it is sunny today. I heard a bird crow, therefore I should be the king of France. There's absolutely no relationship between any of those things. That is not a strong argument. It's not even I don't even think it's a valid argument. Maybe it could be because absurdities are actually valid, but that's a concept that's totally unnecessary and not useful to you at all. So that's just a cool little fact. But anyway, so one way to kind of show invalidity is to use counterexamples. Because it's actually pretty difficult to prove something is like always valid or something of that nature, but it's a lot easier to show something is invalid. So one thing we can do here, right? So here, let's look at an argument where all of it's factually true, it's factually correct, but it's invalid. No cats are dogs, no dogs are apes, no cats are apes. These are all factually correct statements. But here's the problem. When you make a counterexample, you have to make an argument that has the exact same form as the argument you're trying to test, that has all true premises but a false conclusion. So if you look at the form of the argument, and these arguments are in standard form, meaning like, numbered out and whatever. So no X are Y, no cats are dogs, no X are Y, no Y are Z, no X are Z. That's kind of the form of this argument. So let's look at that with a different example. No men are women, okay? Like, I might catch heat for someone in the comments. This is just talking about biology, if that's allowed, if that's any different, I don't know. This is just an example I could think of. Whether or not you decide, here's my thing. Just live your truth. Like, as long as you're living truthfully and not harming other people, you can be whatever the hell you want to be. That's my general stance on it. There are more nuances to that, but generally speaking, like, it doesn't matter. Like man, woman, like whatever, like gender, that's a completely different thing. I'm just talking about biology, okay? Now, if you want to educate me on that, and if you think that I'm just, completely bigoted, leave me a comment in the comments below so I can assess and get more insight into that, right? But anyway, no men are women. No women are men. No women are fathers. Sorry, that is a typo. This is a typo. No men are women. No women are fathers. No men are fathers. This is the exact same format as this example, but it's clear that while these premises are true, the conclusion is false. So let me actually fix that real quick, because I do want this to be correct. Fathers. All right, slideshow. Get back to that. So yeah, so no men are women, no women are fathers, no men are fathers. It's the exact same format as this one, but it's invalid because you have two true premises and a false conclusion. So you just shown that this argument is invalid, meaning this one is also, even though the premises are true. Another example: all humans are mammals, no humans are reptiles, no mammals are reptiles. Three true statements, right? Unless you count like a specific someone who believes themselves to be a reptilian overlord and master class assassin and merc, then whatever. But for the most part, no rational, unbiased person would actually believe that. So let's move on. All humans are mammals, no humans are reptiles, no mammals are reptiles. So looking at this form, we have all X are Y, no X are Z, no Y are Z. That's what we're looking at right here. But then when you look at here, all men are humans, no men are mothers, no humans are mothers. Two true statements. All men, all people of mankind are human. Okay. No men are mothers. We don't have the organs to have a baby in our body. And then finally, no humans are mothers. We know this to be false. At least I'm pretty sure my mom is a human. She's an incredible human. She beats my ass like the devil when I was a kid. Just kidding. I love you, Mom. But yeah, all humans are mothers. So this is a clear example of all true premises and a false conclusion, meaning that it's invalid. So you can only tell an argument is definitely invalid if you have all true premises and a false conclusion. If that is the case, it is definitely invalid. For a counter example to work, like I mentioned with all of this, it must have the same exact argument form you are trying to validate. So we're trying to validate these two. We provide an argument that has the same exact form. It has all true premises, the first two, and then it has a false conclusion. So that means it's an invalid argument form. So there are such thing as valid argument forms. I would highly recommend that you go into, just do a quick Google search, modus ponens, modus tollens. Those are the two that come to mind, substitution or something like that. But this is what I just wanted to kind of start off on, mainly because, like I said, it's not that hard to present you just straight up facts and give you three different, like, or a series of facts, right? A series of things that just on the surface seem true. But you need to do further investigation. You need to see if the actual connection between these things is a good enough reason to believe in it. It's not always the case. So that's why I want to kind of lay this out. These examples, might not be super relevant and everything like that, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to watch a video like that's more about how what a person's are like, and I want you to watch a video, right? It could be mine, it could be someone like Basement Bodybuilding's, Natural Hypertrophies, Jeffrey, Verity Schofield, anyone, Alpha Destiny even. Something where they're sharing their opinion, and I want you to try and put their argument into argument form, meaning like lay out the premises, lay out the conclusion. The conclusion can be anywhere too. Like sometimes people will start out with their conclusion and then give you all the premises as to why they believe the conclusion. That's pretty standard. Others will just like have nothing but their premises, maybe hide the conclusion in there, and then the conclusion can be anywhere, but try to identify the conclusion, try to identify the premises, and then I want you to critique it yourself. See if it's a valid argument, see if the argument is strong, see if the argument is factually correct, because those are the things we can ask. We can ask ourselves, are the premises true? And then we can ask ourselves, do the premises relate strongly enough to the conclusion? That's what you should be trying to do when you're like having bouts of logic, right? What you don't want to do is you don't just want to be someone who like believes nothing but brute facts and then think that that's enough to justify your belief in like whatever, right? What you don't want to do is just get duped into thinking that like just because someone is presenting you an argument that sounds good on the surface, that is actually like a valid argument, like there's too much of that. Too much of just blind faith and blind believing, and part of that is because we were not taught how to do this. So I hope this is helpful. This is very like spark notesy, very maybe even disjointed, quite honestly. I do think that while this is what most people kind of need in their day-to-day life, if you are interested in going into it a bit further, there are a bunch of free resources. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. My name is karelstandstrength.com. If you are interested in this topic, leave a comment in the comment section below for any other philosophical concepts that you would want me to kind of cover. I would be more than happy to hear and reply to your thoughts. So that is it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.